The time is 5:31 p.m. on Monday, July 24th, and I'd like to call this work session to order. Counselor Winter, I know that they're trying to get your technical difficulties in your camera set up.
Okay.
One of the options is for you just to log out and then come back in and see if your camera is working.
Well, I don't mind as long as you don't mind. It doesn't matter to me if my picture's not there.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you in chambers.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's probably good enough.
Okay. All right. First on our agenda then, our city updates. Ms. Solano, please take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, City Council. The mayor is with our police chief on their way to look at a real-time crime center in Albuquerque this evening and not in the chambers. But this evening for the updates, Councilor Winter and I spoke earlier today, and she had been in communication with Ms. Amber Billings from CDOT, who's joined us via Zoom, who is the Region 2 right-of-way manager and has some information that Councilor Winter wanted the rest of council to hear regarding a proposed gondola study. So I'm going to turn over the time frame for the city updates to Ms. Billings, and I think you can make her go live. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm not sure exactly how much information you have. I was originally approached to see if this was something that CDOT would consider. I believe a Mr. McWilliams had been presenting to you, and Mr. McWilliams has not reached out to CDOT. I just wanted you to be aware of that. I have not approved any leases or anything for this to go over I-25 at this point until I've been approached and even just having the opportunity to look at it or to review what they're proposing. We can't approve anything like that. This would have to go over I-25, I believe, is where it's looking at. Potentially over by Runyon Field. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that the council is aware that CDOT has not been approached and we have not approved this at this point. Is Ms. Winter on?
Yeah, I'm on Zoom, Amber. Thanks for that. Also, if you could just explain a little bit at what that would entail. I mean, I know that Gibson is trying to get a conveyor belt over I-70, which is a huge convoluted project that may or may not even occur. So anyway, if you could just elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually went and looked into, we have a kind of a similar gondola over State Highway 6 in Glenwood Canyon. It's the Glenwood Tramway. So that area, they had to get approval from the Federal Aviation Authority. They had to get approval from the Colorado Passenger Safety Board. In order to do this, we would have to do what's called an aerial lease, where they would have to pay a fair market rent to CDOT. We don't allow any improvements within the right-of-way. So if they were going to do this, it would have to completely span the interstate and State Highway 50, which is Santa Fe. They would not be able to put any towers or anything like that within the right-of-way. There are several different safety guidelines that they would have to follow. There's a vertical clearance where they have to be a certain height above the traffic. The bottom of whatever the gondola is would have to be that high. They have to conform with current FHWA design standards and safety criteria for that classification of highway. So this is an interstate, so it's going to meet more rigorous requirements. Same with the I-70. So to start the process, we would have to do a NEPA clearance. We would have to have some kind of concept drawings. Even with that, I can't guarantee that it would be approved. It would have to go through our engineering department. They would have to work closely with our engineering for design. We'd want to know what their plan was, if there was a malfunction, if things got stopped over the interstate, would we have to shut down traffic on the interstate? There's a lot of different things that would go into it if we got to that point. We'd want to know that they have an ongoing revenue source, that they can maintain it. I'm not sure if the city is looking to be an entity with this for liability. Sometimes we enter into agreements with local taxing authorities like the city or county, so that we have some kind of funds to maintain. That way, if the company that's running it went bankrupt, there's a recourse for us to have the infrastructure removed. I'm kind of just throwing little things out there, but it's pretty complex. So it sounds like it's very preliminary at this point, but we definitely need to be involved if this is going to be considered.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Ms. Billings, for that perspective from CDOT. Are there any questions from council? Councilor Atencio?
Thank you for giving us that information, but it's not a no right off the bat, right?
No.
If everyone goes through the proper procedures and does the proper paperwork, it could be done like it was done. Where did you say, in Glenwood?
In Glenwood Canyon, yeah. But that was a state highway, not an interstate. So it's a little bit different, but I mean, if they were able to meet all the requirements, if they're willing to spend the money to do it, I guess.
No, I just, there's just so many people that are saying no before the process even begins that I don't like to see that. I would rather see a process. And if CDOT is willing to look at the process and make a good decision, then I'm good with that. I just don't like to see a blanket no to start with.
So is this a city-sponsored project?
It could possibly be a private public partnership, but we haven't gotten that far either. So
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Councilor Winter?
Amber, were you involved in the one in Breckenridge that the town of Breckenridge put up where they had to divert Highway 9? And again, that's not an interstate, but the traffic slows way down right there. And I mean, that process took, God, probably 17 years to even get approval to put in.
Yes, I was not a part of that. I can look into how, like, all those details, but yeah, I was looking at the Glenwood and it took several years as well. We have to go through a NEPA process for these leases. So that process alone can take a year or more. And then we have to look at the future plans for the interstate through here. So we'd have to look back at the environmental evaluation that was done for I-25 and whether we're going to be widening and stuff. So it can take some time. I'm not sure how long, off the top of my head, but it's not a quick process.
Right. Thanks, Amber.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Councilor Flores?
Would you happen to know whether all of the railroads that go through our city would also probably have some concerns and issues that we would have to address? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with their concerns, but I know that it's difficult for CDOT to be able to do crossings across the railroad here in town, and it's a big process as well. They're probably more restrictive than we are even.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if they've been approached on this. Sorry.
Well, great, Amber. Thank you so much for giving us that information and clarifying the process. I see no other questions. So again, thank you, Ms. Billings. Moving right on along on our agenda then is an update from our Fuji Kids. So can I please have Miss Adriana, Mr. Aiden and Mr. Tyler to the podium, please.
Oh.
Then if you can also just state your name for the record, please.
Serena Sakal, spell the last name.
No, you're good.
Okay. I just wanted to introduce our Fuji Kits and let you know why they're here to speak tonight. So our Fuji Kits program began in 2020 from a grant from the Department of Law. It's the same grant that funds our cooking classes and our youth-led chicken coop. And so we wanted to bring the Fuji Kits before you all to speak tonight and share updates on what they've been doing, so that you also can pass along this opportunity to other young leaders in our community and just know what they've been doing, and they have a lot to be proud of. So.
Okay, so we're just going to start with some introductions. My name is Adriana Sauceda, and I'm going to be an incoming junior at the University of New Mexico. I am majoring in speech and hearing sciences and minoring in family and child studies. And I have a goal of becoming a speech language pathologist who specializes in pediatric care. I was a Fuji Kit for 2 years, my junior and senior year of high school. And my favorite thing that I have learned from the Fuji Kits is that it is possible to grow your own food. And that is one goal that I actually have that I never would have thought of if I was never a part of the Fuji Kits. So.
I'm Aiden McIntyre. I'm from Pueblo Central. I'm a junior. I've been a part of the Fuji Kits since 2021. And I've had a lot of fun getting to meet new people, getting to tour. One of my favorite activities was touring solar roasting, getting to see how they ship their coffee to all their distribution centers and how they process the beans.
My name is Tyler Thielemeyer. I'm 17 years old and I'm going to be a junior at Central High School this year. I've been a part of the Fuji Kits for just over a year now, and I'd have to say my favorite part of being a Fuji Kit is all the opportunities we're presented with to step forward and be able to be leaders in the community. So as who are the Fuji Kits? The Pueblo Food Project Youth Council, aka the Fuji Kits, is comprised of 14 to 18-year-olds who are excited to make a difference in our community with the Pueblo Food Project.
So our goal is not only promoting healthy eating, but making it more accessible to various members of the community, because healthy food is often much more expensive than junk food or unhealthy food. So over time, we have explored various methods of making that food more accessible and just learning more about the food system in general. So we started and were established in the 2020-2021 school year. We did 3 meal kit distributions, Bessemer Extravaganza, which I'm sure you guys know what that is, but we helped out with that and we were able to give away food kits for 600 families. We also did Fruits of Love, where during Valentine's Day, rather than giving candy, we send students home with baskets of fruit, and then we give them some recipes to make that fruit more delicious by like mixing it together, putting lemon, stuff like that.
During the 2021-2022 year, we did our meal kit distribution, which was the recipe was tacos, and we gave it out to 40 families. We did the DIY salad dressing, which was 20 families, the Bessemer Extravaganza, which was over 600 families, the DIY pizza, which was 15 high school students. Our Fruits of Love was part of my planning, and I got to help out with, I got to send all the emails out to all the principals, to all the schools, and got all the information. And we fed over 500 families. The healthy cookies, we gave out to 10 families and 10 full recipe kits, and the healthy microwave meals to 5 single family homes.
So something that we did forget to mention in these years where we did a distribution of kitchen appliances through various schools. So I went to Pueblo Centennial. We had various different drop-off points for kitchen appliances. So cutting boards, knives, spoons, cups, different stuff like that. People in Centennial were able to donate those things, and then at the Pueblo Food Project, we washed everything and then boxed it for different families to go to the low-income housing unit, the right place. And I was able to take a lead on that, which I think gave me some very valuable leadership skills.
For the 2022 to 2023 school year, we made a survey for our peers that we were able to send out to a lot of our high schools and share with our friends. So we were able to get a good gauge of how our friends and their families are doing food wise. We had, as we said, or as we talked about, our third Fruits of Love, being able to distribute those fruit baskets. And I was happy doing that because I was actually able to contact my own middle school and elementary school to arrange that. And we had a Food Kits retreat for us. That was 8 participants. We were able to tour the new Fuel and Iron and learn what was going on there. We had 7 participants. We had a nutrition lesson with six participants. And then probably my favorite activity thus far with the Food Kits was the Film and Cook, which was 10 participants, where we watched the Pixar movie Ratatouille and made Ratatouille together. And then finally this year, we had a farm field trip out to, I believe, NOLA Naturals.
We are accepting, we have an application out right now for new Fuji Kits that want to do it. It's great for credit hours for community service. I've gotten almost all of my credit hours without even having to, I've just had to ask for them. I show up to the things that we're doing and then I just have them sign them off for them. And
So being a Fuji Kit actually helped me to pay for my education, because I was able to put all of the different things that I was able to lead in and participate in my scholarship applications and even in my college application itself. So it did help me to pay for my education. And not only that, it gave me valuable skills in not only like leadership, but also planning events, going through with those events, finding people to help you, and just a lot of navigating different opportunities. So this is a picture from the Fuji Kit, or some pictures from the Fuji Kits Film and Cook. I think it looks really cool because there's all the colorful ingredients in our Ratatouille recipes. This is from our NOLA Naturals field trip. We got to see a lot of the different animals and even see some of the produce that they're growing there. This is from Fruits of Love, which we have done 3 years in a row. And then this is one of the recipe kit handouts that we did. We actually recorded the recipe being made for the people that got it. So if they wanted some help doing the recipe, they could look on our website and get that. And then another meal kit distribution. And then this is in a mural. The Levy mural. I always forget the name. And that's just another picture of one of the events that we did.
Great. Thank you for that update, Fuji Kits. Questions from council? What's the age limit on being a Fuji Kit?
So we accept like 14 to 18-year-olds. It used to just be high school, but we started accepting like 8th graders, or even if there's a middle schooler that's like super interested, then we could work with them and probably accept them as well.
Great. Do you guys get paid?
So the Fuji Kits don't. I'm currently a paid intern, but if you're a part of the Fuji Kits, then it's volunteer based.
I know that the youth development agencies are slowly going towards paying young people for their time as a way to be fair and equitable, right? Because like when you guys show up to meetings, you're still giving your time and your valuable expertise And Serena is in the same capacity and she's getting paid. So I would encourage the Pueblo Food Project to adopt that model, particularly when I'm sorry? No, you're going to have to come and use the microphone. When we're doing, lost my train of thought. Don't know. Encouraging young people with financial stipends is a huge barrier to be removed. And I encourage the Pueblo Food Project to adopt that model.
So currently we offer gift cards for students for their time and volunteering at events. We're able to give them gift cards in various amounts depending on like what the event was and what kind of work we were doing. And that is by request. But that's what we're doing right now in terms of offering that. It is community service. So I think a lot of the time, the kind of work that the Fuji Kits are doing you don't get paid to do community service work so that they can get hours and stuff for their high schools. But I do like the idea of paying them to attend meetings and things that we're asking more of them. Another thing that I didn't mention is the youth summit. That's part of the Colorado Food Summit. So that's kind of a separate activity from the Fuji Kits, but they recruit Fuji Kits to be a part of that organizing. So we had a group of Fuji Kits last year who were a part of that and they got paid for that because that was like a separate project that they were putting a lot of time into. So there's opportunities for paid work as well.
Yeah, I do think it's the best practice model. What, Councilor Martinez Ortega?
Thank you. Just tell us again, how do folks get involved?
So we do have the application that is currently open for the next school year.
So do folks find it on Facebook? Do they find it on, like, how do folks find it and
Yes.
apply?
It is currently on the PFP Facebook page,
Pueblo Food Project Facebook
the
page.
Pueblo Food Project Facebook page. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great. And I like the way that how the impact is what you're reporting out on the impact is that you're educating folks not just right now on how to grow or buy food, but how to prepare that food in long term. That's great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you so much, guys. Great job presenting. All right, moving on our agenda. We're going to talk about secondary dwelling units from our friend, Mr. Hobson. I also just want to note that Mr. Hobson has passed out a sheet of questions before us. So he will be referencing them in this presentation. There you go.
Very good. Thank you. I'm Scott Hobson. I'm the Acting Director of Planning and Community Development with the Planning Department. Tonight, I'd like to review the proposed ordinance that we're working on with the Planning and Zoning Commission that would establish secondary dwelling units as being allowed within the city of Pueblo. Overview of the proposed secondary access dwelling units. First of all, we have named this secondary dwelling units where most cities have identified this as accessory dwelling units. In the current municipal code, we have an accessory structure section of our code, which pertains to like garages and outbuildings that's already included within our code. So we've used the term secondary dwelling unit so that it isn't confused with an accessory structure. So a definition of a principal structure pertaining to like a residential structure. It's the principal use of a primary use to which a structure is devoted and the main purpose for which a structure exists. So we have primary residential structures on homes. And so a secondary dwelling unit would be something in addition to the primary residential structure on the property. Secondary dwelling units are set up as two different types. The first one is, I need to start switching this. Sorry. The first type is an integrated secondary dwelling unit, and that's where the additional dwelling unit is incorporated into the primary structure of a house. So that could be adding an addition to the house, adding another level to the house, or converting an existing residential structure to have a secondary unit that would have a kitchen, a bath, and living quarters that would be separate from the existing primary residential structure. The second type of secondary dwelling unit is a detached structure. And that would be a unit that is not attached to the primary structure. That would be its own separate residential structure built within the same lot, or it could be the conversion of an existing accessory structure, such as building a dwelling unit on the upper level of a garage. So there's two types. Addition to an existing structure and a detached separate residential unit. So where would SDUs be allowed? And this is what we are initially proposing in the ordinance that the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to be reviewing. They would be allowed as permitted uses by right in all agricultural zone districts and all residential zone districts where properties are adjacent to two right-of-ways, which can be either streets, so it could be a corner lot, or a property that has an alley, or it could be a combination of those. They're also allowed in residential charter neighborhood zone districts. Zone districts that they are not allowed in would be R1, except by special use permit, mobile home zone districts, because a mobile home really, it's a HUD manufactured unit that really cannot be modified as an accessory dwelling unit, or in a manufactured home district. Those are all HUD certified units that are approved and not inspected by regional building department. Where would they be allowed with a special use permit? R1 zone districts, and then R2, R3, R4, R5, and R6, if they do not meet the frontage requirements that would either be alley or a corner lot. They would not be permitted in office, business, or industrial zone districts, except if they're a residence established. So it was a residence that would have been established prior to 1968 when the city zoning code. We have several older structures that had secondary dwelling units that have been in place, and those are allowed under the established code. Another part of the proposed code is, does a property owner need to reside in one of the units? And a lot of these that I'm going through are cities have approached these in different ways. We've gone through and looked at many cities in the Front Range to see that have existing zoning codes that allow for secondary dwelling units, and cities have approached this in different ways. And one of the most significant issues is whether or not an owner needs to reside in one of the units. Currently, under our proposal to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we would require an owner to reside in one of the units. It doesn't necessarily have to be the accessory unit. It could be the primary unit or vice versa. Property owners who choose not to reside in one of the residential units, they have the option under our current code of splitting the unit in half and then creating a duplex. And under our zoning code, R3, R4, R5, and R6 allow for duplexes with two residences on one lot. R2, currently you have to get a special use permit to be able to do that. The next issue is there a floor area or is there a limit to the size of the secondary dwelling unit? What we're proposing in the ordinance is the floor area of the secondary dwelling unit should not exceed 40% of the floor area of the principal dwelling unit, or 1,250 square feet, whichever is less. Except, we'll go to the next slide. If the floor area of the principal structure is less than 1,500 square feet, then the maximum size of the accessory dwelling unit would be 800 square feet. So the idea here is that the secondary dwelling unit would be complementary, but not the same size as the primary dwelling unit. Most of the cities that we looked at, their ordinances follow this to where the additional dwelling unit didn't overwhelm the current primary structure. There are some exceptions that we're going to have to look at if this is adopted, because in some of the older neighborhoods, the primary structure, residential structure on the property is really pretty small. So the new secondary dwelling unit may become the primary unit, and then the existing residential unit could serve as the secondary dwelling unit. So we're going to have flexibility, especially in the older neighborhoods of the city. Also, all or a portion of an existing detached accessory structure may be converted to a secondary dwelling unit. Next item is additional off-street parking required? And under our recommended ordinance, SDUs would require one additional parking space in addition to this parking space that is used for the principal residential structure. And the parking space could be, as the exhibit shows, it could be either a driveway from the front of the property, or if there's an alley, it could be a parking space that comes off the alley. Or if it was a corner lot, it could be either frontage, street frontage for a corner lot. Next item that we are considering in the ordinance is, are there height limits for SDU structures? And what we're proposing, the maximum height limit for a detached secondary dwelling unit and other detached accessory structures should be no higher than 28 feet. The maximum height for accessory dwelling units that are added on to principal dwelling unit, we're following what's already in the current zoning code for the height within what that zone district requires. Next is, does a SDU addition need to be architecturally compatible with the primary residential structure? Our proposal says that new construction or modifications to existing structures must be architecturally compatible with the principal residence. Newly constructed or modified integrated SDUs must be constructed so that they maintain the appearance of a single family residence. So if you have a primary residence and you convert, either add an addition to the primary residence or convert that, any addition to that should be architecturally compatible with the appearance of the existing home. And then a detached structure should be architecturally compatible with the primary structure. This is that, and that's something that several cities have really looked at. It's consistent about any modifications to a primary structure that it should be architecturally compatible with the existing house. A detached accessory structure, there's been some flexibility where some cities have required architectural compatibility. In fact, the majority of cities that have adopted these have that. But there are exceptions to where some cities are looking at waiving the architectural compatibility for a detached secondary dwelling structure, just because sometimes it's difficult to match the architecture of a primary structure. And so there's been flexibility. We're currently suggesting that that structures be architecturally compatible. So what is the timeline for the proposed adoption of the secondary dwelling unit? We're looking at, and this is tentative schedule, we're looking at September 13th, having a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission on the proposed SDU zoning code amendment. And then October 10th would be first reading of the text amendment for the ordinances with City Council, and then final reading October 23rd. What I have done is prepared 5 questions to kind of get guidance on this. And these are probably the policy questions that most of the cities all had to go through to really say what direction, how do we want to move forward with a secondary dwelling unit ordinance. So the first one is, should residences in an R1 zone district, and that's a minimum 7,000 square foot lot, receive permission to add an SDU only through a special use permit? Or should they be able to have a use by right, be able to do this if they can show that they can add an additional parking space to the property, for their property? So it's kind of, should all R1s that want an secondary dwelling unit have to go through a zoning special use permit process or not? And some cities have required this for larger lots. And in Pueblo, R1, we really don't have a lot of R1 zone properties, and pretty much all of those are in the edge suburban developed subdivisions of the city that do not have the grid pattern of streets, that do not have alleys. So pretty much all R1s basically access from the front of the property. If it's a house that's on a corner, you have the ability maybe to access either from one or the other street frontage. So that's one of the questions. The second one is, should an additional parking space be required if an SDU is added to the property? And parking is usually one of the main objections or concerns for adding secondary dwelling units to lots. And I kind of have a pro and con of what's the good side of whether to allow for parking, and what is the con. And the pro is usually density and parking and traffic are the biggest concerns in neighborhoods. And so by not requiring parking spaces, you could be adding to parking issues within local neighborhoods. The con is, if you have to require parking spaces for each one of these, then it could impact the number of properties that are converted to secondary dwelling units. So there's pros and cons. Number 3, if a property is only accessible from the front street that does not accommodate an additional parking space, should we require a special use permit? And this kind of falls in line with the other parking, where if you can't comply with what the parking standards are in the ordinance, can you still allow that, but through a special use permit issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals? Number 4, should a property owner be required to reside in one of the dwelling units? And the pros are that by requiring this, it maintains home ownership in neighborhoods. And the con is it limits the number of new rental housing units that could be added within a neighborhood. And this is probably maybe one of the most significant policy issues that would need to be addressed in a secondary dwelling unit ordinance. And then the 5th one is, should a detached SDU be required to be architecturally compatible? And so the pros are that it keeps the compatibility and maintains the existing architectural look of a neighborhood. And the con is that sometimes requiring architectural compatibility for detached units that are most likely going to be in the rear of a primary structure. Could add cost to make it unaffordable to create these units. And sometimes it's really difficult to match the architecture of a primary structure. So these are kind of the 5 policy questions that we're working with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have submitted the draft of the ordinance to the Pueblo Realtor Association, to the Pueblo Home Builders, to the Committee on Community Development, and also the Housing and Homelessness Coalition for their comments and their recommendations. So at this point, that concludes my presentation, but I'd be very interested in comments.
Yeah, that's a lot, Mr. Hobson. Thank you. I know that we probably have a lot of comments. Counselor Flores will start.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question. It has to do with a developer that wants to develop a house with one of these secondary dwellings as a project. You see this a lot in Las Vegas. They call them mother-in-law houses. It's almost like every house in Vegas now comes with a secondary dwelling. So at the point that they find a buyer, after they've built the house, how does the title company, I guess, confirm that the main structure, I guess, or even the secondary is occupied by the owner and not another landlord, as an example, someone that wants to buy these units and rent them out or rent the whole lot with these 2 units on it?
When we've looked at the way other cities, at least in Colorado, are dealing with this, they require a property owner affidavit before an occupancy permit is issued for the secondary structure, that essentially that one of the units is being occupied by the owner of the property.
And then my second question had to do with the construction process. There is no difference in the requirements with Regional Building Authority as far as the codes that they have to follow are the same, whether it's the primary or the secondary. There's no difference there. You can't kind of cheat on the secondary dwelling by, using minimizing the cost as an example.
My understanding
Code.
Yeah, my understanding is that all accessory or secondary dwelling units would all have to comply with the residential building code and residential standards through regional building.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Maestri.
I think something we just have to be cognizant of is that people don't buy into neighborhoods to all of a sudden have structures, everybody down the street adding a structure to add income property. We buy in single family neighborhoods. So I'd want to make sure that we're really aware of what we're doing here when we go to put ordinances in place. I've come from a lot of cities or lived in a lot of cities that have the mother-in-law quarters is what they call them, an accessory suite. But we can't let it go. I wouldn't want to see it just kind of go out there where all of a sudden people are adding a structure to add income property. And, they take their income properties and they start adding structures to them to produce more money. That's not fair to people who buy in single family neighborhoods. So I'd want to make sure that council has a good, clear understanding that we don't put ordinances in place that are going to allow that to happen. And a lot of these cities that have the accessory dwelling units are mother-in-law quarters. So there usually is an owner that lives on site and then their family member lives in the accessory, the additional structure. Just some things that, that Because I don't think do we even have that now? We don't have that now because.
Our zoning code at this point does not allow for
Mhm,
2 units on the same lot.
mhm,
The only exception to that is if a lot is large enough that the owner owns both units,
mhm.
and there is the lot is at a size with the appropriate setbacks that if it were to be split off, it could independently meet the zoning code for that district that it's in.
Yeah, it would be nice to take baby steps on this and just start with that one allowed structure for family or whatever before we start going into all of a sudden having multifamily housing in single family neighborhoods, because that could happen. And I wouldn't want to see that. And homeowners would not want to see that. That's not the types of neighborhoods they move into. That's my thought on it.
Thank you. That's the challenge of developing an ordinance like this that adds secondary dwelling units are probably the most economical way to add dwelling units to a community. But there are pros and cons with how it affects neighborhoods.
You know, and in the larger cities where they don't have available parking space and you've got cars lined up and down the street, and that creates another issue. We're still a small city, not a large city. And so it would be nice to make sure that we have adequate parking available off street to have the nice look of a nice city street neighborhood. Thank you.
Other questions? I'm actually really excited about this. I disagree. I think that this is going to be a really good ordinance to get more housing in the city. Because we need housing at all levels. Who would determine, Scott, if an SDU is compatible enough? Like, who would make that call? P&Z or ZBA?
It would probably, the city has single family placement standards for what the structures look like in the code already. And so administratively, as building permits come in, we review those to the placement standards for what the architecture, we have certain standards for architecture, and then we would probably administratively review a new development to make sure that it is architecturally compatible. I doubt that we would run every one of those through P&Z for a review. That would be my recommendation, to have that become part of the administrative review process.
I guess in my opinion, or if I had a magic wand for question 5 around detached SDUs, architecturally compatible, I would say no preference unless it's in it's historically designated area or a historic neighborhood, because I can see how you would want to preserve the architecture in that specific neighborhood. Other than that, I think it creates an undue burden on builders to try and accommodate, the stucco or architecture otherwise. For the second question around additional parking spaces, I guess similar to Councilor Maestri's comment, I don't think that R1s should have, there should be a designated parking space on it. But I also think the more urban that you go, like downtown, I don't think, I think that's kind of the feel or the expectation of a downtown city center, that you're going to compete for street parking. So is there a way that we can see what the comps, like it would be dependent on the comp plan designation, if there would be parking or not?
We could certainly look at that, and the future land use areas that have designated for higher levels of density. We maybe could look at whether or not we would be less restrictive on parking, and then the areas that were more of a suburban character, maybe look at making sure that parking was off-street parking was able to be accommodated.
Okay.
Mr. Hobson, how does this play into the HOA requirements? HOAs sometimes require to get approved the color of the house that if you're going to repaint your house. How is that going to play against what the HOAs already have in place to changing the zoning laws?
That is a very good question. And I didn't include it in the presentation because I was focusing on kind of the 5 major issues, but in the draft of the zoning ordinance, if there's a prohibition on secondary dwelling units or any kind of deed restrictions for secondary dwelling units within subdivision, then that would override any of the city's changes to the code and to where those would not be allowed in that kind of situation.
Yeah, because as much as we need housing and we have a shortage on housing, I don't think that we need to chop up neighborhoods and the way they've been laid out and planned in the past and how people buy to live into that neighborhood with a single family home. I just don't think, mostly these are going to be investment properties and investors can go out and buy new lots and build houses or build in a multifamily section, but to just say that we're going to go in and just systematically allow these things to happen is just, it's not right to the people who have purchased already and live in their neighborhood, and they live in their neighborhood for a reason. So I just want to be real considerate of this community and their homeowners' pride in homeownership and just be very cognizant of that. Thank you.
Do other counselors have any guidance or direction on any of the proposed questions from Mr. Hobson? Seeing none.
I
Oh,
do.
sorry, Counselor Winter.
That's okay. Scott, I think we've had this conversation several times, have we not?
Yeah, we've been working on
Yeah.
this for quite a while and focusing most directly for about a 10-month period of time to see it. This has been included in as something to look at in the regional comprehensive plan and in the housing study. So it's just getting to the details of what actually works and what's the policies that council will feel.
It just seems like it's taken forever to get to this point. I mean, seems like we've had this on the back burner forever. We don't have any policies now for how much parking is on the street. So I don't know how you're going to control it with additional housing in the backyard or I mean, we don't enforce any kind of parking policies on the street. I mean, somebody can have junk cars lined all up and down the street and it doesn't matter.
That's true.
For new structures, though, for the approval of building permits, we do review the parking on off-street parking as part of the approval process for new structures. I don't disagree with you that there's parking in especially the older neighborhoods where there's on-street parking for residences, but currently under the code, any new structures, residential structures, there are parking requirements that need to be shown and identified in their development plans prior to building permits being issued and certificates of occupancy.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Thank you, Mr. Hobson. If council has any direction, perhaps we can email you with the answers on these, Scott. Excellent. Great. Moving on then, our last agenda item, our city council board commission updates. I see friends from Pedco have joined us in the back, which I think ties into one of our updates. Who would like to start?
Yeah, I don't have any updates from the airport advisory committee right now.
Noted. Counselor Graham.
Okay, I'll be brief. So tonight, with the Pura board, we have 612 and 618 2nd Street on the east side that are on our first reading on our agenda. And these are 2 addresses that we have been working with Pura. We are going to transfer the liens to Pura, and they will be working on a partnership with affordable housing similar to the Habitat for Humanity home that they did on Glendale. And so that'll be on 2nd reading in 2 weeks. So that's what those 2 lots are for when you guys see those. And then I also just want to say that Dutch Clark is looking fabulous with the new sidewalks, parking lot, and the trees. Please, it looks really nice over there. Can't wait for that to open this year. The HARP update is they had a very successful Rolling on the Riverwalk. We had over 10,000 people come downtown, and the council did provide $9,000 out of council contingencies to put that on to be a free show this year for the citizens. So that was great. But I did want to have Clyde, if you'll pull it up. This happened in the bathrooms at the Harp Welcome Center last weekend. And I just really wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. The bathrooms are now closed because they had significant damage done to them. They're not sure who did it. But the Welcome Center bathrooms are closed. So when we see the Harp's budget ask this year, remember this is one of the capital improvement projects that they will have to fix to get open. And so, really just such a shame for the Riverwalk and Harp Authority when they provide these public spaces for people to use facilities on the Riverwalk, and then somebody goes and does this to them. So super unfortunate. But on the Petco side, I have invited our friends from our newest job, 87 new jobs coming to Pueblo. We'll see it on first reading tonight. If you guys just want to come up and maybe introduce yourselves, that would be fantastic.
We're putting you on the spot because that's something we love to do to
Yeah,
people.
so they're only in town for a couple days, and so they won't be here for second reading. So I thought that they could take the time to introduce themselves tonight. So we have Jeremy, who is the co-owner, and Crew, if you want to just have a seat and, introduce and tell us a little bit about your project.
All right, great. I like being on the spot. I am Jeremy. I am with Foam Core. My wife Ivana is behind me here. Sitting next to me is Chad. He's our facilities manager. Our company is in Muskegon, Michigan, and we're excited about the prospects of being here and learning a lot about the community. Chad will be helping the community here as far as putting together our building. Scott is our COO back in Muskegon, Michigan, helping put together the program here to start producing the soft seating that we do. And Alicia Wiggin, I saved for last. She is moving here to run the project here. She'll be the plant manager, and she'll be guiding our team as we try to build a culture and build into a community, and also make some furniture and hopefully provide jobs that continue to grow.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. I know I put you guys on the spot, but I just wanted to introduce you to the council while you guys were in town. So
That's all right.
thank you. And we look forward to your business. This will be a second location, correct?
It
For
is.
western part of the United States. And-
Yes, I'll briefly say we looked at 20 different cities out west, and Pueblo by far blew us away with the community effort. I mentioned earlier that we spoke for maybe an hour with Pedco, and after about an hour, we actually got to the fact that we made furniture. It was about community. It's about how do you build community. It's about how you help employees grow, but not only in the walls, outside the walls. So again, that's why we landed here, and that's also why Alicia is leading it, because that's her heartbeat, and she is certainly the heartbeat of Foam Core. And although we will miss her in Muskegon, Michigan, we're super excited that she can be here and lead that effort here.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
I wanted to welcome you to the community, but I also wanted to talk to the public because we are televised tonight. And I wanted the public, we get criticized every so often for having spec buildings and buildings that are available. And I think I'm safe in saying that our recruiting your company would not have happened had we not had an available spec building. And that's something that I get to serve on Petco, and so does President Graham. And we're constantly looking for those opportunities because we have a unique system in Pueblo of providing incentives. But a lot of times we get criticized for building these buildings. And this is a perfect example of why we're doing this and why it's so important in our recruiting new companies and creating jobs, is to have something like that available. as I understand, you have to be up and running by, is it March of next year?
Yeah, it is.
So we're really on a fast track here.
You're absolutely right. So the first reason we look at a place is culture and community. But we do need to produce product and we needed to do it pretty quickly. And you're absolutely right. The spec place that you had it not been here, would have made it much more difficult. We might have waited a year. We might have, who knows what happens with that opportunity. So you're absolutely right. Having that building available, walking through it the first time we were here was an absolute game changer. So we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And you're not going to regret picking Pueblo, I guess.
Oh, I already know that.
Other comments for our new friends? Where's Muskegon?
Oh, right here.
Nice.
This is Lake Michigan and this is Chicago over here. So we're right there.
Nice. Well, Pueblo,
Yes. All right. I'll remember that.
Councilor Maestri.
I think the constituency would like to be informed of the terms of your agreement. I read through it briefly in the past couple of days. And I see that you're planning on bringing 87 jobs to Pueblo. And is that just a straight $41,000 a year salary per employee, or do you have higher paying positions?
I think
Is
the
there a
average.
salary range, because I saw 41,000.
Yeah, I think the average is 43,000 if I remember correctly.
43.
And it is a range. There'll be some salary, there'll be some hourly positions.
Mhm.
A lot of what we do, we do everything from cutting the foam to cutting the fabric to sewing. So a lot of the machines and things, there are training. We call it light manufacturing, but it's not just pushing a button. You have to be trained. And so it is a higher level position.
Mhm.
Correct, 43.
Is it like a CMC position? Would it be?
There are some, yep, there are some sewing positions, there's some upholstery positions. So
Mhm.
Scott is my COO, so I'm looking over my shoulder to make sure I'm very accurate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, so we're looking at our spec building that we have in place, and you're asking for or not asking, but the contract agreement puts in another $6.5 million to retrofit the building for your company. Is that how we're reading it, or what's the 6.5 million investment that we're taking out of our?
So no, that's gonna be to build it similar to the spec, what authority we have in the ordinance to build it to a. But that's not part of the employment agreement.
No, it's not
That's
part of
separate.
the employment agreement. It's to get the
We
building.
keep the building.
Correct.
Building doesn't go to them.
No.
Really.
But are we?
Mr. Shaw might be able to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, the spec building is a form where it's essentially the walls and the ceiling and
Mhm.
floor utilities aren't meant to. So we have to either,
Do you think you could come to the mic, Jeff?
sorry, Councilman. So typically that went on.
Press again.
Push it.
I turned it off. Is that better, Councilwoman? So typically our options are sell it or transfer it to a company and then they can finish it themselves, or some companies, for whatever reasons, want to lease facilities. So in this position, we'll finish out the building. So that estimated 6.5 million is the cost to finish it out, which is run the utilities inside of it. Obviously, the offices run the full finish out of the facility. And then the incentive part, which is part of the employment agreement, is a rent reimbursement or rent abatement. So they earn that as they go. And then they would be paying the lease payments over and above that, in addition to an extension. So this the citizens and the house and sales tax fund essentially gets recouped those dollars either through lease payments through the term or through the extension, or potentially a sale of the building down the road.
And how much was the original cost to construct the spec building?
About 3.8 million.
And so then we're adding another 6.5 in order to finish it to suit the
That's correct.
company coming forward.
That's correct.
Okay, and I noticed that we are doing a rent reimbursement. So by the end of 7 years, there's probably $19,000 that we are clearing. Like I said, I read this over the weekend real quickly, so I'm just, and the public needs to know.
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's
and so they don't go into the depths of reading the contractual agreement, even though it's publicly posted. And this is the opportunity to like round some numbers off so that they have a clearer understanding of what we're proposing here.
Sure. No, your point's
Mhm.
well taken, absolutely. And so the term that the deal essentially, we're somewhere in the beginning of year 8 because we did an 8-year lease on it to be able to capture the rent reimbursement or the rent abatement, I guess, if you
Mhm.
will. Over and above that, it's just a flat rent at the market rate. And then there's an extension option in it that it kicks into a next to higher level for what we anticipate for the market rate would be for then. So they would just be paying the lease payments back to the city. But you're correct, it would be the rent
So
reimbursement.
it's like a $9.8 million investment in the building to employ 87 employees, correct? So that they're here and they can go into business and employ 87 employees in the workforce at an average of 43,000 a year.
It's utilizing a finished building that'll cost somewhere around $8 to $9 million. That's correct. The Halston sales tax voters would recoup all the investment minus the rent abatement portion of it, but we may get those through the spending for the community based on the jobs and the direct benefits and the indirect benefits.
And so how are they recouping the 9.8 million?
Just, okay, I think
Well-
that it was an opportunity just to introduce our new friends from Michigan. Perhaps what we need to do once, they leave is have Mr. Shaw and Petco back just to answer questions.
Just one more question.
Mhm.
What is the makeup of your workforce? Do you actually, is most of your workforce, what would you say? Straight out of the justice system, the penitentiary?
Oh, no.
You don't employ any?
We do. We have we work with a ministry called Fresh Coast in Muskegon
Mhm,
that does placement for former offenders.
mhm.
And so they go through a vetting process, they go through a training process. I'm not
What's-
totally
what's the
familiar here, but I
percentage of
understand.
We have to move on.
Yeah, percentage of your workforce.
We have to move on.
Okay.
We are more than happy that you're here and relocating to Pueblo. We can definitely schedule another work session about this later on. But we wanted to welcome you to Pueblo. Thank you for choosing Pueblo in our community. Thank you, Mr. Shaw, for helping answer those questions. Next on our agenda then is an executive session. I'll take a motion to go into executive session.
Oh, by the way, I'm on the PDF board and they were instrumental in getting these people here to, just saying.
Let's do that first.
What?
Let's finish the other update.
Oh, updates. Apologies. I was.
Forgot.
Yes, I forgot. Counselor
Real
Tencio.
quick, yeah, I am on the Pueblo Development Foundation Board and they are very instrumental in making sure that we have those facilities when a company does come to Pueblo. We get to build the spec buildings and we get to finish those buildings when they need to be finished also. So without PDF, we probably wouldn't have very many companies come into Pueblo. I'm on the regional building. Mark Guerrero, our new building official, has taken over. He's going in gangbusters. It's going to be a much better place when he takes over. I'm on the Fountain Creek Watershed Flood Control and Greenway District. We are working towards getting as much done on the Fountain Creek as possible. But with these rains that have happened, they've washed out a couple of projects that have been done. So Mother Nature is telling us again, look out because I'm in charge. You might be able to do a few things on the creek, but she's going to do whatever she wants to do with us. Otherwise, that's it for me.
Great. Just quickly for the Commission on Housing and Homelessness, we have a new facilitator, the Civic Canopy. They have been facilitating meetings for a couple of months now, as the city will be posting actually for an FTE. And we have one. Congratulations to our Department of Housing, who will be guiding and now helping to facilitate that commission. We're going to be doing a strategic plan next month. broken up into homelessness and housing. So that's very exciting, where we'll be implementing it in the coming year. I also sit in planning and zoning, where we heard a fantastic presentation about secondary dwelling units from Mr. Hobson. University Park was just approved to have more subdivisions kind of in between where Big R is kind of ish and where Bluestem is. And Posada actually came back to the table and they were able to get their their planning application approved for multifamily residential housing near the Jamaica neighborhood. Counselor Flores. Counselor Maestri.
I'm not in any committee since I went back to work full time.
Okay, so that then I will concludes the member update. Can I take an executive or a motion to go into executive session?
I move to go into executive session for a conference with the city attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions under CRS section 24-6-402, paren 4, paren B. And the following additional details are provided for identification purposes. Single subject limitation under section 3-18 city charter.
All right, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Second.
sorry, we need a second. Counselor Martinez Ortega seconds. All those in favor of going to executive session, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none, we adjourn into executive session.
So Sarah, will you call me from the conference phone or how is that going to work?
We're setting up a secondary Zoom for you, Counselor Winter. If we should have emailed it to your